we spent the most harrowing night with our first encounter in international waters with the Israelis. And they threatened to fire on the boat in 5 minutes if we didn't turn around. They approached the boat and they disabled our communications equipment and, most importantly, our GPS. They also shook the boat, which is something that I've never experienced before, as if there was a high wave. We were in a little ferry boat, and the boat, honestly, the boat was slower than I could walk. And so it wouldn't have taken very much for them to board the boat, which they eventually did. But they shook the boat, and then they shut off our GPS. And our GPS was off for like 4 or 5 hours. What we felt, and they tracked us the entire time. According to our captain, what we felt they were trying to do was to steer us into Israeli waters so that they would have an excuse for doing what they eventually did. Now, an interesting point is that at the point when we turned into Gazan territorial waters, the Israelis who had been tracking us the entire time, that's when the speedboats, several speedboats, there were 4 speedboats that came to us rather quickly, and they all jumped out and commandeered the boat, sidelined the captain, and then they proceeded to try and destroy the boat by driving it at a speed that was too fast for the capacity of the ferry that we had our crayons and coloring books on. Interestingly, in one of the encounters that I think is sort of classic, is that this huge gun, I mean, they had guns, rifles, big, huge weapons, and they were telling us to sit down, be quiet, don't say anything, turn over everything that all our possessions we had to turn over to them. And Catherine didn't give them one of her bags, and he said, "What's in that bag?" And she said, "Crayons." He said, "What? Crayons?" And she said he lowered his rifle and looked into her eyes, and so I mean, that moment, I mean, all we had was crayons, and we're totally harmless. We have a Nobel laureate, Mairead Maguire from Ireland, on board with us, and we were treated in this fashion. Interestingly, there must be something going on that the Israeli Navy is carrying out in the territorial waters of Gaza, because they could have taken us directly to Port Ashdod, but they didn't do that. They took us in a very, very circuitous route so as to bypass anything that was Gazan, and therefore the suspicion is that there is some activity going on in those waters. Of course, you know that there are tremendous natural gas deposits that have been discovered there. Well, the soldiers used incredibly foul language, and they used that language to Mairead Maguire, and the men came to her, the men who were in that area where it happened came to her defense, and as a result those men were handcuffed. And so we were approximately 37 hours on the boat, and that is partially due to the circuitous route that they took us on to eventually end up at Port Ashdod. There are some people who never received their personal belongings. I'm one of them. Some very important personal papers I never got back. So you know, I think clearly the Israelis, by the fact that they claim Gaza territorial waters as their own, claim the land of Gaza as well. And
welcome to Terminal 8 at John F. Kennedy International Airport. You should not accept offers of transportation.
I will have to say that we got a unique glimpse inside the Israeli prison system, and very much like that of the United States, it's very black. It is populated by people of color, and we saw an endless stream of men being processed as we were being processed, and these men were African and Asian. Lots of Filipinos, lots of Africans. In the cells that we were in, they separated all of the Free Gaza 21 women, and they put us in separate cells. So we had an opportunity to interact with all of the women on our cell block, and there we heard tremendous stories of hope as these people left their countries for the Holy Land, and then disappointment and in some cases despair because of the way they were treated. Many of the women, not all of them, but many of the women had papers of recognition from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, but the Israeli police intimidate and harass them and pick them up, and they say to these women, there is no United Nations in Israel. We were in jail. We were in prison, and so we had to be inspected, and this is another thing. Why so many men on the floor in charge of these young women? These young women have to be inspected by these men, and I think that, well, the men are in charge of the cell block, so they come in and they count, you know, whatever it is that needs to be done, it's been done by men. And I just found that, and then the women were chastised for wearing tank tops because they said the tank tops were suggestive and they had to go inside and put something on their shoulders. Can you imagine? There's no recreation for the women, no exercise, no organized exercise program for the women. I asked for milk. Prior to that, the women didn't receive milk. And so, you know, it's prison conditions. Well, it was just one stream of lies and deception after another. The lawyer for Free Gaza was actually inside the building, and the Israeli authorities refused to tell the lawyer where we were, and refused to tell us that our lawyer was available to us and wanted to see us. The only way we found out about it was that one of the women who had some experience with Israeli detention went outside for a smoke and saw the attorney on her way to the courtyard to have a smoke. And so when it was my turn to go into be interviewed by the Ministry of Interior, I told the representative of the Interior Ministry that I know that our attorneys are present and they are looking for us, and before I can talk to you, I must be allowed to speak with my attorney. Now, I was told that I was rude to the court because I refused to talk to the tribunal. I didn't even realize, I mean, all of the proceedings are in Hebrew, and so you have no way of knowing what is going on. There's no translation services available. They give you your paper numbers in Hebrew, and I looked up on the board, and there it said detention tribunal. I said, is this a tribunal? I thought I was going to get a health check. And the judge was there, Judge Greenberg was there, and she said, yes, this is a tribunal. I said, well, I can't talk to the judge without first consulting my attorney. And she wrote me up as being rude. Well, we didn't know anything. And in fact, we only just now found out, just as we were boarding the plane, we found out what our itinerary was. We knew nothing. We were never told anything. Never. Tremendous thanks to the people who participated in spontaneous demonstrations in Atlanta, New York, DC, Los Angeles, Haiti. People in Haiti took to the streets to demonstrate on our behalf, and all over Europe, people did the same thing in front of the Israeli embassy. I have to say a word of thanks to them.